But we are live on Facebook, so that's good. And I want to say hi to everybody. I'm Lauren Van Hemert from RDU on Stage, and I'm with Martha Steketee, who I know from the American Theater Critics Association. She's the chairwoman of our organization, and I thought it would be a really interesting time to reconnect with you. It seems like a minute ago we were just at our national conference in New York last November.
It's in the time before.
In the time
in November.
Yeah. People were out and there was no social distancing.
Exactly. There was much hugging.
Yes. I miss those days. I'm looking forward to coming back in November and hopefully reconnecting with everybody.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the journalism standpoint. I've spent the last few weeks speaking to theater folks here and in New York, and so I feel like I have a very good handle on the artist perspective. But I was speaking to one of my journalist friends this week, and he was telling me his newspaper is no longer printing. Staff has been furloughed. And so this really is affecting journalists as well, unless you're a journalist covering this virus. But from the arts journalism standpoint,
oh, absolutely,
really affecting.
Yeah. Well, I could speak to that, but could I take a second and talk about how my two perspectives, kind of what they're kind of colliding right now?
Yes.
Just a little bit of a vamp before we get to that.
Yes.
I find that a really fascinating topic, how arts journalists are expressing themselves and engaging with what's left of the art form, or what can you look at when we no longer have live theatrical performances to look at right now, and how they're spending their time. And there's a lot of creative work being done. But I just wanted to talk more about, how we know each other and the other things I'm going through now, and so people know who I am or what perspective I'm bringing to this. So I'm a member, as Lauren is, of the American Theater Critics Association, which is the one national theater critics association, founded in 1974. And I'm currently the chair of the executive committee. It's a rotating kind of task. It's a 9-member board, and there are other people on it. We'll get you on the board soon, Lauren. Yeah, no. But it's the creative energy of new energy coming on is a value. So anyway, so I've been the chair for a year. And in that capacity, I've gotten to know great people like Lauren from around the country, and also, from that seat right now, watching how our brothers and sister journalists, arts writers, critics around the country are trying to engage with this phenomenon is really fascinating, heartening, troubling. But we're now, in a way, just occurs to me now, arts journalism has been in a stage of bemoaning its loss of, the loss of resources, arts journalism jobs. Now we are part of a worldwide phenomenon, and which is lots of people are going on hiatus, we'll say furlough. There's a pause in every career right now. And there are some very special, I think, important skills that folks who are used to observing and writing about events in the moment, which is what theater critics are and do, can bring to what's happening right now. So I think, and so that's kind of one perspective, this kind of bigger, philosophical, professional lens on what's happening, and the organization we're both in, and trying to grapple with it. And the other hat I bring to the conversation right now is the fact that I'm a part of one of the Theater Awards committees that operate in New York City, and the one that I'm why both at the same time, I don't know, but I'm the chair of the nominating committee this year, again for the second time, of the Drama Desk Awards, which is it's an award program that's been around since the 1950s, that honors, and one of its unique characters, there are a couple of others that do a version of this, but it honors Broadway, off-Broadway, and off-Broadway, so that we on the committee of 7, and there are voting members, another several hundred, but we're the committee that assembles the nominated, the slate of the nominees. And there are about 30 categories, 25 to 30 categories, acting to design to even puppetry, some interesting categories that evolve over time. And we had to, we see about 300 shows in the season, between 250 and 300 shows in the season. So personally, subjectively, what's going on right now with everything shutting down, I am like everyone else going, what is my life? What is the routine of my life? Every day I'm usually about this time, I'm in a theater or I'm walking to the theater. This is my life is as ours are. You're in theaters, experiencing the art form, writing about it, thinking about it, considering awarding it, and so that stopped about 3 years ago, or 3 weeks ago, and our committee, like all the other awards committees, had a decision to make, and they've made a wide array of them, which we can talk about now or later. I'm just babbling on, but
Well,
giving the context.
let's go there, because I think it's really interesting that this week Drama Desk, it's kind of interesting. The Tony Awards is postponing. We're not sure when that's going to happen or what that's going to look like. But
Yeah.
Drama Desk is persevering.
Well, yes, yeah, with a decision of the board. The board had to be on board. The Drama Desk has its own board. The supporting I don't know all of how they would describe what they do, but it's now Broadway Brands who does Broadway Briefing. Those are the folks who are the hosts of our awards ceremony, and they do a lot of other organizational support. So with consulting with them and the board, and of course they had to consult with the chairs, consulted with me, representing the nominating committee, like if we were to go forward, can we pull this together, which of course I said yes, which means we're doing some Zoom meetings, which we've never done before, starting tomorrow, in fact, to wrap up the season. So the Drama Desk decided to go ahead and truncate the season that it would consider for this year's awards on the day that was the last full day of shows being up through the 11th, which meant a couple shows that were just about to open won't be part of our season this year. And the Lortels, let me see if I want to make sure I state this correctly. There are several other programs that made slightly different decisions. And some, like the Tony Awards, have decided just let's postpone and possibly into the fall, but we'll let you know. People, for their own very legitimate reasons, said we're not going to make that decision right now. But yeah, we decided we'd seen enough. There's such great work to honor. It feels it will always be a season with an asterisk, that will be in the history books that way, because it didn't play out the way it was supposed to. There were still 16 Broadway shows to open. There were still another 40 or 50 off-Broadway shows we were going to be seeing, maybe 30 or 40 in the remaining maybe 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks that we were going to be seeing shows. So we didn't see everything that had originally envisioned, but we could defend a season that ended at the time the theaters were closed by edict, as it were. Yeah, it feels good to be able to celebrate what was, and there was an awful lot of really exquisite work this year.
I think so too, and I'm excited. I'm a little saddened that we're at the start of this next season as we've approached this pandemic. There were a lot of shows, like you said, that were slated to open during this time that are being postponed, but the season looked really good to me, as did last season. So
Mhm.
I hope those shows still have a chance to open.
Yeah, I do too.
I'm a
They're
little
just
worried about some shows.
Yeah, there are a couple of disappointments that were announced that they weren't going to open, including I know it's yet another revival, but I was really looking forward to seeing Laurie Metcalf dig her teeth into Martha and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and that's not going to be postponed. They won't be able to put it up. I'm sure it has to do with availability of the stars, but
Yeah.
and a number of them, the theaters have announced that they will be moving them to the beginning of the next season, whenever that should be, but they're saying fall. People are being very hopeful that the theaters will be open again in the fall.
And what is the mood? You know, I think the mood, it seemed like it was very hopeful when April 13th was kind of that date for Broadway to reopen. And as we got into April, I think people were looking forward to things getting back to kind of a normal or a new normal. And now here we are in April and they've extended the shutdown to June. What
Mhm.
is the mood among the arts community that you're hearing with this pandemic being extended,
Well,
or
here,
the shutdown being extended?
I don't think anybody really truly believed that anything was going to be opening in April. If you were living here, that was a hopeful. Um, th- I won't. Yes, that was a hopeful statement, but I didn't think that was going to be happening.
Mhm.
No. So it wasn't a sudden shock. I don't think. I think it's been a slow boil realization, and just kind of trying to get comfortable with it. It moved from, in the first 2 weeks, I know this was my personal reaction, and maybe many people shared. You're thinking, okay, well, let's just keep it together, and none of my normal routines are normal. I can't go to the gym because no gyms are open. You can't do, like, all the normal routines are slightly weird, but I can hold my breath for 2 weeks and then everything will start again. And then after holding your breath for 2 weeks, you realize, no, this is going to
Yeah.
take a while. This is really going to take a while. So at the point the Broadway League finally announced, I think most people here locally had already internalized a longer shutdown. Yeah.
I'm wondering, you know, it's kind of interesting to see artists, theater makers are very resilient. And so it's really interesting to see how theaters and arts organizations and the artists themselves are reinventing how to deliver their product, how to find a new audience online or live streaming or
Mm-hmm.
Zoom play readings. Lauren
Yes.
Gunderson's giving playwriting workshops on Facebook Live.
Yes, I saw that.
As journalists, especially arts journalists, is it time for us to also start thinking about how we deliver our content and reimagine new ways to deliver content or report on the art? Because there's all of these things happening around us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard as an arts journalist who's used to covering something live to say, okay, I'm going to cover a virtual event. What does that even look like now in the reporting of it? So is it
I think there's some really important and intriguing and nuanced conversations happening about that right now. Like right now, like the last couple of days, there was a, and if you follow Twitter or reading people publishing in the major outlets, at least covering New York theater, it's probably happening. It's happening all around the country. I'm just looking at New York theater coverage mostly the last couple of days anyway. So I don't need to name names, but there are some more kind of established, older, really well regarded, but older critics saying, this live streaming thing, that's all an interesting thing, but it's not quite cutting it for me. It'll never be the same. It's never be quite the same, and I can't quite get into it. So, and just kind of, and saying more things about it from their perspective, and a number of other folks, independent of age, but younger folks and folks coming at, younger folks too, and playwrights and writers saying, you know what? That's missing half of where the creativity is. We can't look at what's happening right now from the lens of it's not what was, therefore it's less than, and therefore let's just wait for live to start up again. We're missing half of, you're missing the creativity that's happening right now, and it's really quite exciting. And I don't want to lose the point of how do we cover it. I mean, for me, because we'll get back to that, but I'm just fascinating myself also experience. I've paid to see some live streaming. I've seen some, and sometimes it's just, yes, it's different, but it can be really thrilling. For example, maybe you saw it too. I think it was the star. Are you following the Stars in the House stream?
Yes.
God, that's great. And I can't remember if this was theirs. I think it was. This was an Actors Fund reading of Lips Together, Teeth Apart that Trip Cullman directed. And we should mention that some of those readings are, I think there are some union-specific details that need to be negotiated in this world that we're entering here of streaming. I want there to be more streaming. I think personally, figuring out the technology of it is important, and let's figure it out. Sometimes it's not very good. Sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes you get frustrated because you can't hear and you can't see. And like, what is this? And it's not live, and it's not what I used to like. And what is it? So I say not, we can't do it, but let's try to figure this out. And those readings, one of which was Lips Together, Teeth Apart, I think it's a one-time only, and it's not meant to be recorded, partly to deal with the equity permissions to do it. I don't know what made me think about that, but that's another theme to consider in this evolving world we're in. But I thought personally that particular, I think they use Skype, but it was a four-hander, as we know, that play, and directed by the lovely Trip Cullman, theater director. It was really delicious, I thought, a terrifically directed piece that utilized the mechanism of screens, and they were staging a play. They were doing a kind of staged version of was written to be on a stage. But I think these four performers with their director and how the Brady Bunch squares were utilized to tell us the story was really terrific, and made something that wasn't a stand-in for the live experience, but something new to me. It was. So I get excited about that. It wasn't just not live on a proscenium stage. It was something else, something new.
Well, and the other conversation that we've had, that I've had with a few artists here, is that what's happening in this new virtual way of delivering theater is suddenly theater is becoming very accessible. And there are a lot of folks here that feel like they don't want that to go away. Things open back up. So do you think some of this technology, some of this virtuality is going to stick around after this is over?
I
Not
hope
to take the place of live.
No.
But yeah.
Spread the reach. I hope so. It feels inevitable to me now that we've had a taste of it.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it'll have interesting ramifications for things like awards, like everybody determining definitions. There's one particular play that illustrates that, or might be the precursor to maybe for next season. It was a beta test or something. There's a play that was just about to open, or maybe it had just opened. Anyway, I was going to see it right after stuff closed on the I was scheduled to see it on the 14th of March, and everything closed down on the 12th. And fortunately, well, actually the very performance that I was scheduled to see was at the Rattlestick. It was a play called The Siblings Play, which personally I thought was a tremendous play. It's a brand new play. It was filmed very nicely. There was social distancing in the theater, so they spread people out. They had a couple of cameras and kind of choreographed it together well, and made it available. I actually paid because I wanted to see it. You know, at this point, I made no decision about whether it was eligible, and we still haven't because it's on this cusp. But in future, a show like that's made available, filmed live during the run, decently made available to audiences, and if we care about awards, awards nominators and voters, should that be included? I asked that almost rhetorically because I think yes. If we begin a season with that agreement, I find all of this shifting stuff fascinating, and that happens to be an example of, personally, this is just my personal opinion, and I didn't write about it, but I was really kind of wowed by the play and this possibility.
Well, and one thing I do find interesting as we navigate these new waters, Eric Woodall and I had a conversation about licensing. They were going to open up a production of Memphis, and he's now the producer, artistic director of North Carolina Theater. And everybody was kind of like, okay, just film it and stream it, and not really having the understanding that you can't, your performance license does not cover streaming. So I think there's all these interesting legal and licensing issues that are going to need to be addressed.
Yes, I didn't mean to skip over that. Absolutely need to. Everybody needs to have their rights protected.
And then the other piece of this is the playwrights. I was seeing right away some playwrights taking to social media because theaters, as productions were being canceled or postponed, theaters were asking playwrights to return monies and royalties and license.
Yeah, there was a big, what did the kids say? Clap back? There was a really serious response to that was very public, very right away. And hopefully that was so wrong.
Yes.
I mean, the challenge to theaters totally accepted, and no, that's the playwrights' money.
Absolutely. And the playwrights need to be protected, which is really what the Dramatists Guild does so beautifully. So I guess from the Dramatists Guild perspective, I'm guessing there's going to be conversations as you meet over the coming, I don't even want to say weeks, but over the coming years, as to how do we protect our writers and
Absolutely.
I don't want to say during a time of pandemic, but just overall.
Yeah.
Do you find there's a lot of creativity being produced, and I do find the virtual stuff very creative. Are you hearing from dramatist members that this is a period where their creativity is being nurtured and challenged, or is it being hindered? Or, I'm hearing a little bit both from the artist community here. Some artists are seizing the day and using the time to write, and others are just in shock, processing.
Oh man, I think that's something that it's hitting everyone. I mean, everyone. Writers, actors, I know, teachers, whatever the heck I am. Like some days you think great, it's a pause, but we don't know what the future will be. And sometimes it's thrilling how the pieces of our lives are going to fit together. Some days that's thrilling, and some days that's just utterly exhausting. So yeah, I'm encountering the full array that you described,
Yes.
and how people are responding to this time. And then suddenly we hear about, as we were talking about before we went live, then we hear about people we know who are ill or have suddenly passed away from this thing that's going on. It's not a, it's it's serious stuff that's right there around us, surrounding us every day.
And
I don't know if it feels that way to you in another part of the country yet. Are you hearing about cases that are local, that are
we
touching
are hearing
folks?
about a lot of cases that are local. We are, but I don't think it's hit us in the same way that it's hit places like New York or California, where it's been so widespread. The numbers are definitely going up, and every day we're hearing more people being hospitalized. Where I live very close to a hospital up the street, and one night my husband went for a drive, and they were setting up these large tents in front of the emergency room, and my husband said it was very sobering to him to see that. So
Yes.
I think the reality is setting in, but we're still probably a few weeks behind New York in what we're experiencing.
And I guess I only brought all that up just to say that I don't think artists or any performers or writers or directors or designers are any different than anybody else right now, right here anyway. They're trying to make sense of their work life, meeting as they meet online for the most part, practicing good social distancing. And as I was saying to you before, at least on my walks as I walk around, it's moved from a small proportion of people to the majority of people I see as I walk along wearing masks now, on the street. And I do too when I'm outside. And that has an effect. It has a social effect. It has on your how you're seeing the world. You're not seeing faces totally. You're seeing,
The other thing that struck me is when we were in New York in November, part of our national conference, we have all these amazing artists come and speak with us and share wisdom with us. And on the last day of our conference, one of our members, Robert Sokol, interviewed Tom Curtahay, and it was so exciting to have him there.
Yeah, he was
and
delightful.
Then to hear just a few months later, Terrence McNally's passing from this, to me, I felt McNally is such an icon, but I felt kind of this personal sense of loss because I had that.
It created
moment.
a connection, and he's that not only the delight of spending time in the same room with great speakers, but he also, Tom Curtahay, is one of those kind of warm humans who felt, I mean, he was really connected to us. Robert did a lovely job interviewing him too, but he really wanted to, he reached back, I guess, as we were talking to him. Yeah, I felt the same way. I'd never met him before. And I felt another level of connection to the loss of Terrence McNally. Yeah.
It's striking. I guess it just adds that personal element of it. I mean, you feel sad. I just seen Ragtime actually right around the time of our conference. I think it was either a week before or a week after I got back from the conference. Playmakers was doing a production of Ragtime here. And to see that work is beautiful and brilliant and interesting, but then when you have that personal connection, knowing that there are people behind these stories, love stories behind these statistics, I guess.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And that's what kind of makes me sad. I guess another thing that's very exciting that's happened within our organization, and it's very exciting every year, but particularly sweet this year because of what we're going through, is the Steinberg finalists were just announced. So can you tell our viewers what the Steinberg Awards are, because it is kind of a big deal, and then these 6 beautiful plays that are being recognized?
and I don't have that final press. Maybe you have it in front of you. You can get it in front of you. Maybe somehow the press
Okay.
release itself.
Yep.
I am on the new play committee. So the American Theater Critics Association does a range of things over the years, and I should remember exactly how long they've been doing this, but maybe 15 years, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
We've been reviewing and handing out awards that are funded by the Steinberg family. I should have that first. The same family has funded other award programs around the country and have been involved in new play festivals. And they, with the American Theater Critics Association, now fund. It's a $40,000 program annually.
Mm-hmm.
When we determine a finalist, $25,000, and two, call them citations, but still, a $7,500. That's not, we don't say first, second, third, but a finalist and two additional prizes. So a total of $40,000. Two plays, and here's the other thing. So the ACCA is a national organization. New York's important. I live here now. I didn't grow up here. I live here now. I love New York. And there's theater all around the country, and a lot of plays that we ultimately were about to see here in New York started in other regional countries. So the part of the regions of the country. So a defining characteristic of what's eligible for our program is it's a play that has premiered some is not in New York. It's a play that hasn't come to New York in the prior calendar year. So show plays like, I don't know, Cambodian Rock Band won last year and just opened here. Viet Gong a couple years ago won our award. And when you're on the new play committee, and are you? I can't remember. Are you on the committee?
No,
But no.
no.
It's a fair amount of work. So members, and I'll stop babbling in a second, but the members of the organization, most of whom are not in New York, nominate plays that have premiered in their jurisdiction and submit that play for consideration by the committee, and a committee of maybe it's 50, maybe it's 20 people, a little less than 20 people now, stalwart folks led by Lou Harry, who's based in Indianapolis, read, up to 30, 35 plays that have in about a 2-month period, and decide upon these winners. It's a thrill. It's an honor to be part of a program that gives away a significant amount of money. And, selfishly, some of our members have mentioned this too. We're introduced to plays that kind of on the early end of their life, and we were able to give the playwrights and the play itself a little bit of a nudge. Yeah.
The six. Well, I'll read the 6 finalists in a second. Last year or the year before, I want to say Noah Heidel's play Birthday Candles.
That was last year, and it was just about to open here on Broadway. It kills me. Yeah, I loved it. It was my favorite play. I loved it on the committee. Yes.
Okay,
yes.
So for local folks, the reason I'm bringing up Birthday Candles is because our own Vivian Venice, who is the producing artistic director of Playmakers in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, is directing her college roommate, Deborah Messing, in that play and making her Broadway directorial debut.
And we are still hoping it's going to open. They haven't made a clear announcement of whether it will be postponed or when. Yeah, I do. It's a glorious play. It's just delightful. And I feel, Noah Hadel and I are from the same town in Michigan. Well, small city, Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I feel a connection to him, even though he's 30 years younger than I am. But,
Vivian and I had a wonderful interview for the podcast. I know some of our students have been assigned episodes of my podcasts to listen to for enrichment. So students, if you're listening, please listen to the podcast with Vivian Venice, because she speaks a lot about how she has been with that play since it was workshopped at the Chautauqua Theater Festival.
That's lovely.
How she's kind of ridden the wave with it. So it's very exciting for us locally to see that happen. But the 6 finalists this year are Animal Control by Chandler Hubbard,
Mhm.
which was at the Firehouse Theater of Richmond, Virginia. The Coast Starlight by Keith Bunnan, I'm going to say, which was at the La Jolla Playhouse. The First Deep Breath by Lee Edward Colston II, which was at
Mhm.
Victory Gardens Theater in Chicago. How Light Gets In by E.M. Lewis, which was at the Boston Court, Pasadena,
Yeah.
California. Nonsense and Beauty by Scott C. Sickles, Repertory Theater of St. Louis, and Sheepdog by Kevin Art. I know I'm going to mess it up, but Artigue.
I don't know.
I don't
I mean,
know.
I don't know off the top of my head.
South Coast Repertory in
Yes.
Costa Mesa, California. So I wanted to read the theaters as well because they're not New York theaters.
No, they're not your theaters. And these awards go to, a plaque goes to the theater too. So the money goes to the playwright, but we honor both the theater with our award, both the theater that produced this premiere production and the playwright, him or herself. Yeah. One other, we usually, yet another thing that shifted this year. So we will be announcing, and we're figuring out how we're going to do it. We'll have some kind of online ceremony probably. We'll get the money to the playwrights within the next couple months probably. But that's something that we're figuring out, how to deliver this in our digital world, our online world. But we usually and historically have handed out and had a presentation, the playwrights there and representatives from the Steinberg family at Humana for years. And this year, we'd actually built an entire conference around a new venue for us, which was in fact South Coast Rep and their Pacific Playwrights Festival, which happens in April of the year. And we were going to be having it looked to be very exciting, conference late this month, but we know what happened. We canceled, and then they eventually canceled. So we're figuring out this alternate way to deliver that prize. It wasn't the only thing that was going to be part of the conference, but we built the conference around this time inaugurating a new home base for where we'd deliver that prize. And so that was one of those sad things, but a happy thing will come out of it. These playwrights will get the prizes. Yeah.
I do want to ask you, because you spend a lot of time reading plays and new plays. I have some friends who are spending their time reading a lot of scripts right now, reading a lot of plays. So, what plays should be on our play reading list, and what plays or shows should be on our live streaming list? I know Fleabag just announced that they're doing a live stream and some other things. So do you have any recommendations as we're all quarantining?
Golly, you should have given me that little hint before. But honestly, if you haven't seen, no, that's great. I did see that Fleabag is on. I saw it when she did it here in New York a year or so ago. Last year in the spring, she did a special little run in this tiny little theater. It's a stunning work. So do watch that. I think they're asking for a little bit of money. It's worth every cent.
It's only like $4 or $5. It's not very expensive.
Yes, it's extraordinary. And what's lovely for those with a dramaturgical bent, I'm a dramaturg too. And if you've watched the series too, you can see the kernel of the idea, the inner one woman show, and also see her range. She's a stage performer and a writer and a screen performer, and she can do all of it, and it's a wholly different piece as a one woman confessional kind of story on stage. It's just she's on a stool in a light on a dark stage, and that's it. And she creates a world. It's pretty stunning.
Any classic plays we should be reading if people have not read them since high school or maybe never read them? Because I feel like this is a time to really beef up our reading, I guess, or
Well,
even
here,
any books about the theater.
oh my goodness. You know, one of my favorite books about the theater, there's so many. Some of them are really historical, but Moss Hart's Act One, to have the vision, to really feel, there could be fiction in there. I don't know. It's his own memoir, but it's a passionate, a passion about the theater and how somebody making a life in theater in another world, in a prior century. But it's a thrilling piece. I think William Goldman's The Season is, you know, ever present. And you know the premise of that book. I mean, other people have done versions of it over time, but he looked at the 1967, 1968 Broadway season and wrote about each of the productions that. And he's an exquisite writer. It's kind of it's story, and each one's a story. You know, this is a writer. You know, so it's not just um, a, a a dry story of where the play came from and where it hit first, but it gives a really in-depth, show by show, organized in an interesting way, vision of that particular season, which is an extraordinary season. Now, I particularly love, something you get to know about me is I'm a big Judy Garland fan. I just am. I am. And this book begins with, its first chapter is, and he's not overwhelmingly a fan, but the Goldman, but he begrudgingly acknowledges the enthusiastic audience response to one of Garland's stints at the Palace. She was there several times, 51, 52, later in 50, I think 57, I don't know. And then again at 67, like a multi-week run at the theater doing concerts. And that starts off the book. So I kind of love it. But you know, that's just an aside. I'm a Garland fan.
Yeah.
But the season itself, it's a fascinating look at the Broadway season. I think there's a really and something that's relatively new. It's, I don't know whether it'll, you know, last in a legacy of great writing about theater people. But there's a fairly new biography of Elaine Stritch that's worth looking up. Can I remember the title of it? No.
It's okay.
But
We'll find it.
you'll
I'll
find it.
find it and I'll list it.
And I'm happy to follow up with scripts. It's terrible I'm not coming up with
That's okay.
plays that people should know. But
That's okay. I've asked our audience who is watching online on Facebook, if there's any questions, you can type them in the comments section and I'll read them to Martha. One thing I'm curious about, so that book talks about 1967, 1968 Broadway season. Can you imagine the books that are going to be written about this Broadway season? Like you said,
yes.
with an asterisk.
Yeah. Yeah, probably some already being written now. I should also mention there's a book called Razzle Dazzle that Riedel, what is Mr. Riedel's first name, wrote about the Schuberts. That's worth, you know, one of the big family producing families for New York theater, theater owning, producing families, is worth looking into.
And a lot of generosity there. I know the Schubert organization funds a lot of our local theaters here and their productions. So that would be a good book to look
and
at.
I will see, you opened up a little world, so I could be looking at my books, but you're reminding me that there's students who might be listening or might at some point listen. There's a book called Everything Was Possible by, let's think of his name, the guy who's the head of the Hammerstein organization. But it's about the story, the dramaturg in me, but those of us who like following the story of a play, of a production that's evolving. It's the story of follies. So he Chapin. Chapin is his last name.
Trying to look it up,
Mr.
but
Chapin.
I will make a list of what you're recommending, right? And I'll put it
Yeah.
with the video.
Any book that conveys the excitement of building a piece of theater, I find worth, and for anyone who loves the theater and wants to make a career in it, or at least touch it in some way, it's worth reading.
The other night I was doing an interview and we were talking about movie musicals, and his top pick for a movie musical was Fiddler on the Roof. And we were talking about, I have not seen it, so I'm going to ask you if you've seen it. There's a new documentary, Miracle of Miracles, about the evolution of Fiddler on the Roof. Have you seen that?
I have seen it. Really worth seeing. Yes.
Okay. Because I think that's on Amazon Prime, and we were talking about that just the other night. Do you think our playwrights, what I love about the theater is so many people say the theater is the mirror to what's happening in our world, what's happening in our society. Are in the next few years, do you feel like we're going to see a lot of plays, musicals, creative work about, I don't even want to say about pandemic, because a lot of my artist friends have compared this period of time to grief. They're feeling a little loss and grieving process. Do you think we're going to see a lot of plays surrounding grief and loss that come out of this period?
Of course. Of course we are. Yeah, of course we are. And it won't be immediate, or the stuff that'll be immediate, it'll be interesting to me to see, yes, stuff that kind of filters through after a couple of years. We were talking before, I guess at some point I was chatting a little bit about Lips Together, Teeth Apart. This occurred to me at watching it recently, written, of course, by Terrence McNally, husband of Tom Curtahay, but written by Terrence McNally. And I'd forgotten while watching it that it's an AIDS play from a distance. At its root is the death of one of the characters. It's a 4-character play, 2 married couples, and lots of really beautifully written play with lots of layers to these characters that gradually are revealed. And they're at this Fire Island beach house because one of the characters has just inherited it from her brother who had recently died of AIDS. And that's not the story, but the characters are reflect on it in a way that are very much of the time. This was in the early 90s, where we were not as a society kind of at peace or comfortably talking about that era that we're still living through, but we were certainly kind of just past the peak of the kind of unnamed thing. And now it's been named, and people were still, and these characters were still being quite offhandedly dismissive and prejudiced about this character that was like there was a whole extended thing about whether or not they would go into the water, into the pool. And it reminded me, oh my goodness, I remember that conversation, that way of speaking in this world of not knowing what this thing was. And I'm babbling about that, but it wasn't what the play was about, but it was present in a layered way. And I look forward to the creative ways that our writers and directors and designers are going to confront this thing we're living through. When it's not just saying the zombie apocalypse, but it's which there'll be some of those too. But yeah.
Please, no pandemic plays. I don't want to see like a whole slew of pandemic plays.
Right.
I do want to ask you this because I've asked almost every single person I've interviewed this question, and I'd like to get your take on it being in New York. What
Hmm.
can we, I mean, you and I are very close to the theater and the fact that we're covering the theater and at the theater multiple times a week.
The
But
privilege of it, yes.
I feel
Yeah,
that it is a gift for me. It is a
yeah.
privilege. Um, but because the arts are becoming so accessible now and people lean on the arts in a time of crisis a lot, and maybe people are becoming aware of theater and plays and musicals that they never considered watching or looking at before, what can we as a public, what do we need to do to support our artists, particularly our playwrights? I mean, you're with the Dramatists
Hmm.
Guild, so we'll talk about the playwright perspective. What can we do to support and
Oh,
nurture those artists now?
yeah. I just want to clarify. I'm not a member of the Dramatist
Oh,
Guild.
no, 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 no. You're
But
on the drama desk.
oh,
Sorry.
yes, 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 yes. I just
Drama desk,
I
sorry.
love the Dramatist Guild, but I don't want to claim,
No, no, no.
playwright status.
The Drama Desk
Yeah.
nominating
Hmm.
committee chair.
Hmm.
So what can we do right now to nurture our playwrights, nurture our artists as we're navigating this pandemic? And then once we're on this other side of this thing and things start open again, what can we do to support our arts organizations and peers and artists?
Well, I'm getting a little echo there. It went away. Um, um, there's time in this period right now. There are a couple of creative things that people are doing, which I think is terrific. There's one, again, thinking about awards committees. The OBs have decided to postpone. I love this. That's off Broadway specifically, and now it's used to be sponsored exclusively by the Village Voice, and now I think the Village Voice exists as more a foundation than a publishing entity. Uh, but they're putting the program out collectively or collaboratively with the Broadway League. I probably got it wrong, but with another organization.
Mhm.
And what they decided to do was postpone the awards, but there's this X amount of money, multiple thousands of dollars that they would have spent on a ceremony to dedicate that to funds for artists in productions that were canceled. I just
Mm.
thought that was really terrific. Like think creatively about needs right now. I mean, that's a very specific thing to right now, and some financial needs that are. But I think in general, what can we do for artists and playwrights? Pay them, honor them. Don't use their work outside of copyright. Get permission to utilize their work. Ask. Sometimes they'll give it to you, but respect the creators. For designers, don't copy their designs because bad practice. Give credit where credit's due. And with playwrights, give a wide array of playwrights a shot at the stage. You know, give that. I think of a number. I'm not going to name names, but folks who may not write don't write in a linear way. You may not even know if you're in the position of being. I guess I'm thinking about being somebody who, in the literary management department of a theater, or people who have the power to help get something up. Maybe a producer of a small production. Support playwrights to have their words heard aloud in front of people. Reading series. Think creatively about whose voice we're adding to the season.
Mm.
And not just one woman and not just one person of color, but program creatively and diversely.
I love that. We talk about that a lot on our and at our DU on stage. So you are validating what
Oh,
we
good.
try to talk about on this program. And I know a lot of our theaters are have programmed their seasons here using this 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
There's this new model that several of our local companies have committed to doing programming that are representative of our communities, not just, you know, the token person of color play, the token play by a woman. It's
Right.
some nice seasons that are shaping up next
And
season.
what I'd always also say, and this might be not be something, this would not be something that the average audience member would notice. I've been working on a project with a colleague, Judith Binus, for, golly, 6 or 7 years now. We've put out, I've written them, but we worked together to assemble the data, a report on the people behind the scenes. So looking at full seasons, we were looking at off-Broadway, but it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plays we've analyzed this way. The playwrights, the directors, all the designers, diversity and gender parity should be thought of through all the roles in theatrical production. And just to remind people to think about that is a thought I thought I'd raise.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for spending this hour with me. It's always
Thank you for
lovely
asking.
chatting with you. For any of our ATCA ATCA members, Robert Sokol will be with me talking about one of his favorite things on Earth Day. He'll be with me talking about Broadway cast recordings and how the record industry and the recording industry is morphing and changing in this time of digital everything. So it'll be a really interesting conversation, and I will put out that calendar next week. But thank you so much for doing this. I've enjoyed chatting with you. I hope to see you in November. I hope things are open.
We are going to work hard to make it happen.
Or we'll be doing a conference on Zoom, and that'll be really interesting.
That could happen too.
Well, thank you, and stay safe and
You
stay
too.
busy. And I'll be watching the drama desks. I'll be very excited to see what happens there.
Well, we're going to have some nominees in a week and a half. So yes, we can talk after that.
Thank you. And I will share the links of the books that you've mentioned. And if you think of any others and you just want to shoot me an email or a message, that would be great too.
Sure.
Thank you.